Welcome to Google Weekly.
Welcome, my name is Bjorn Berendt, and this is the Google Weekly Podcast, which is part of the AskBG.net network of EdTech services. Never stop learning. This is episode 14, Back to Basics, and that darn terms of use, recorded January 30th, 2012. Well, before I get into the show, and I'm going to change up the show a little bit and do what's current in Google first, because this is a Back to Basics show. But before we get into that, I want to remind everybody about the listener hangout that's happening on February 6th at 3:15. You can go to the google-weekly.net website and click on the very top link for the hangout for an RSVP form if you want to get reminded. But this is a hangout that I'm going to record and post onto the show. And listeners, please come. I think we already have different countries represented on the RSVP form. So back to the show, and I said back to basics, and this show goes out to my father who's been asking about this. And he's like, I follow your show, I like it, but it's all over my head. And a lot of that has to do with I designed the show for people who are using Google Apps and need to stay up to date with the new features that are coming out. If you're not a Google Apps person, you might get lost in my podcast, and he makes a good point. So I want to do a back to basics. And I'm probably going to have a couple of these shows because I think this show is more going to be about the tools it offers rather than some of the features of the tools. So most people know Google as a search company, and even the word Google it means to search for it. But they offer a lot more than just searching. And many people don't even know what tools are out there that they offer. First of all is Gmail. Probably a lot of people do know that they can get a free Gmail account through Google. But how many people have actually, when they signed in with their Gmail account, actually looked at all the other tabs across the top? And those tabs across the top represent Google's core suite of applications and core suite of tools. And these free tools are actually a web-based alternative to the popular Microsoft Office. And honestly, I haven't written a document in Microsoft Office in almost 5 years because I use the Google Document Suite. Well, the core suite includes a word processor, a spreadsheet, presentation, drawing app, which is more like a flowchart or concept map, and site, which is like a wiki/web design. Now, this core suite is included right off the bat with every Gmail account and every Google Apps account, which I'm going to talk about the difference between Google Apps and Gmail account a little bit later on. But you get the word processing, spreadsheet, presentation, drawing, and websites, and I encourage you, sign up for your free Gmail account and click on these. At least go in and click on documents and create a document and see the power that you have for free on the web and how it all works together. These documents are automatically saved. You can share them with anybody you'd like, and very, very powerful, very, very user-friendly. Beyond the core suite, they also have their extended family. Now, Google owns hundreds of different applications and Web 2.0 tools, and they offer these tools to everybody who has a Gmail account. And they've all made them a very single sign-on. So tools like YouTube, Blogger, Reader, which I'll talk about later, Picasa, which is photo sharing, and many, many more tools Google owns. It's not part of the core suite, which means it has a different terms of use, but they are pretty much single sign-on. So if you go to any of the Google-owned tools, you click, say, sign on with my Google account, it'll automatically bring you in. You may have to click one little accept of terms of use. One of the newest ones they have is Google+, which is a social network, and it's a competitor to Twitter and Facebook. You've heard me talk about it, and that's actually my main means of communication right now. It's a very fast-growing social network. Do I think it's going to wipe out Twitter and Facebook? I don't think it's going to wipe out Facebook, but I think it's going to be a pretty big detriment to Twitter just because of how people are using it. And moving on. Now, what makes these tools a little bit different? First of all, they're web-based. So any computer that can access the internet can access these tools. They're free. So any person who has a Gmail account, you have access to these tools already. No need to pay a big license fee. No need to ask your friend for them. They are there. The last thing is that they're collaborative, and that's what makes them different. You can share these documents. You can work with people. Multiple people can work on the same document. And that is the power of Google Apps. And that's one of the reasons why it's getting adopted so quickly into businesses and so quickly into education. And that is because of its collaborativeness. You may lose some of the advanced features, but you gain a really great way of collaborating with documents that solves a lot of issues. But let me kind of put one example of the collaborativeness. Anybody who has created a Word document and emailed it to somebody, that other person has made changes, emailed it back to the other person for approval and made their changes. And by the end of this process, you have 5 or 6 versions of the same document, all within your email. And it becomes a problem trying to figure out, okay, which one have I worked on? And maybe both of you have worked on different sections at the same time, and now you have to merge those 2 sections. What Google Apps does is it says, well, let me take out the document from email and saying, everybody's going to work on one web-based document, and you just all contribute to that one document. So a person can actually make changes in real time to a document, and someone at a different remote location can see those changes instantly. They can add comments and bring the conversation together. So at the end of this whole process, instead of multiple versions of the file, you have one file that has a revision history of every single change that's been made, and that can be edited by multiple people. So that is where the real power comes into with this Google Apps core suite. I've talked about Gmail versus their Google Apps. Gmail is their free individual email address. Google Apps is for any businesses or schools or anybody who has a domain name that wants the full power of their suite, but with their own domain name or managed by a central administrator. Google is also moving into some hardware applications. They've built the Android phone or the Android operating system, which can be put on phones and tablets. They've also opened this up so other manufacturers can actually put this on anything. So it's very likely you'll see the Android operating system on a refrigerator later on. I've actually seen it on a watch. And because people can write apps for this to manage anything, you can actually write an app, put it in your refrigerator that can tell if your milk is running low. Or you can automatically use it to keep track of a shopping list. And then that's automatically synced with your phone when you go shopping. So great tool. That's the Android operating system. They're also building something called Chromebooks. This is very significant. The Chromebooks. Right now, there's a lot of schools out there that are trying to put iPads in the schools, and the iOS device is not designed for mass management. It is designed for individual consumer use. And Google said, well, we want to build something that is designed for mass management. And that's where they came up with something they call the Chromebook. And what this is it's literally just a laptop that runs a browser, runs the Chrome browser. These things turn on immensely quickly. There is nothing that gets installed to these machines, so there's zero management of them in terms of problems happening and synchronizing with apps. You access the web, you turn it on, and you combine that with the other free tools they've had. This is a very, very powerful device that is almost zero maintenance. So that is the Chromebook. And this finishes up with the what's current in Google or back to basics. I listed off quite a few tools that they have. And I'm going to go into a little bit more on use of the tools as we go on with the different shows. And I'm going to bring into the what's new in Google. Normally I have this in the beginning of the show, but I thought with the basics, I'll throw the basics at the beginning. So anybody new can just listen to the beginning of the podcast and maybe tune out for the later half. So what is new in Google? They have a new resource website, or google.com/edu. And what this is it puts all their tools into one place, and they actually have an ebook that lists all these things. So if you're a teacher, you can go here, you can click on For Teachers, and you can look at classroom tools and see all the tools that they have broken up very nicely. There's educator resources, so you can see, let's say, data management, what they have with Fusion Tables and Public Data Explorer. Or if you're trying to organize your data, they have the Reader, iGoogle, News, and Notebook. If you are an organization, they have a section for organization. If you're for students, there's a section for students. So this is more of taking all their tools and organizing them in an easy-to-follow fashion. I encourage you, that is www.google.com/edu. You show this to your teachers, post this on your school's website. It is a great resource. The next thing, Google is updating their policies in terms of use. This is not for their core suite, this is for their extended suite. So, and what it's doing is it's bought all these programs and they kind of put all of them all together, and they've always had their own terms of use. Well, Google is combining all those policies into a single policy that's a little bit easier to read. There are also, one of the significant changes in there is it's saying it wants to be able to allow data to go back and forth between these policies. So if you write something on Google+, your YouTube account has at least the rights to use some of that data positively. And as you're going through a lot of these suites, you might see what they call a butter bar. This little yellow bar that might pop up and says your terms of use are changing. So it affects the extended suite, not the core suite. Your education edition, the terms of use basically puts the school as the guardianship of all your other users and your students. And that's how they get away with having students younger than 13, is it puts the responsibility on the school to have their own policy in place and to abide by that policy. One of the other things is that Google Plus is going to be opened up to people at age 13 and older. It used to be just people who are 18, now it's 13. And that's got a lot of teachers excited because this is the first step to being able to bring this into schools. Right now, Google Plus is not available to schools, mostly because of that age limit. Now they've bumped it down to 13, so a lot of people are anticipating that this is the first step to be able to open it up to have Google Plus in a K-12 environment, which a lot of people are looking forward to. By the time I get this to air, I've talked about this in previous shows where President Obama is having a Google Hangout. You were able to submit questions that will be asked of President Obama, and that's being recorded actually as I'm recording this. By the time I post this, hopefully there will be a recorded version of this interview that I can add into the show notes. And then now I'm going to move on to the app exploration part of the class. The first one I want to talk about is for the App of the Week from the Google Apps Marketplace. This is something that the administrators need to enable, and it's called Open Class. And this is from Pearson Education, and it's a learning management system. This has been getting a lot of buzz, but if you look at the reviews, there's one that says, given the hype, it's not impressed. And I think I've logged into here too, and I think it had a really nice looking interface, but it was really clunkish and buggy and still didn't work the way I wanted it to. But you're welcome to take a look. It's Open Class. It's free. It's a learning management system built within the Google Apps Education, so it can be turned on and integrates with your Google Apps accounts. So put it in. Next, the App of the Week for the Chrome Web Store. I put out there, it's called Issue Burner. And this is a help desk system. I believe it was free, at least free-ish. It's one of those tools where it has a free component and then paid if you want more users or something along those lines. This is Issue Burner. It has a pretty good high rating. I mean, we're looking at 4.5 stars with over 6,000 users already. I haven't used it per se for myself because I work at a smaller school, so the issues having a help desk hasn't really become a need here. But it is one that I had pre-installed and kind of was playing with. So I encourage you, take a look. That's Issue Burner if you're looking for a help desk that may solve your solution. The last one I want to talk about is the Android App of the Week. And this is going to be the one Android app that I have actually paid for. And this is the Gtalk status widget. And what this does is it changes your Google Talk status. And I use this in school, and I actually use this in combination with Llama, which was last week's profile switcher. And I use it when I walk into school at work. I actually have it change my status, my Gmail Gtalk status, to at work. So this is a way, because I'm not at work all day or sometimes I have to leave, and this is a quick way that anybody in the school can tell that I'm at MSJ or I am off campus. And I have it automatically change when I walk through the building. It's kind of really cool. It only costs 99 cents. It works very, very well. There's some easy switchers that you can make it work with. So that is the GTalk status widget. I encourage you to go check it out. Now on to the Universal Design Learning section of the website. To remind everybody, I'm taking a Universal Design Learning UDL class, and each week I have to do a reflection. So this is this week's reflection on that. First, I actually really had fun with this week's assignment, and it was, if you had won the lottery and you got to build your own school, what would it look like and what would you include? And this is something I've thought about before. I've just like, wow, wouldn't it be fun if I could build it this way? And some of the things I put into my ideal school, just kind of the little basics, every learning area, and I called it a learning area, not a classroom, would have an interactive whiteboard, and every student would be connected to some type of digital device. This could be a laptop, a tablet, and if they needed it, they would use it, but it's not something I would expect them to be connected all the time. The other thing I wanted to put in there was an alternative learning day, and this is something that I've thought about in the past, and I've actually kind of mentioned it in the past to other people. And this would be a day for both students and teachers to have alternative learning. So break away from the classroom, break away from the norm. All the students would have different teachers. They could either be, those teachers can be like temporary teachers from business owners, can come in and do presentations and work with the students. It may be an inquiry-based learning activities with all the students. But either way, they're not with their normal teachers. They are learning differently. During that time, the teachers also have a learning differently time. And this would be kind of like a weekly professional development / work day. It'll be a day that they can build lessons and really develop the materials. I think that's one of the things that teachers are really losing out on, is they don't have the time to build good lessons. And I believe that needs to be brought into the school day. And like I said, the alternative learning can be for students too, where break them away from the standard classroom and give them different opportunities for different learning opportunities. And I say just basically take Fridays and do that. The other things on my list was a corporate internship program. And this is something that we actually have at Mount St. Joseph where I work. And I love it. And the students who are in this program love it. And it's literally on Fridays, the students who are in the program go out and work at different places, either a law office or wherever else, and local businesses will take these students in, and on Fridays they work in these businesses. They get real life experience. These students are still required to do the classwork that they miss, so they have to do, they miss a day of school every single week, and they have to make that up. I have had a couple of corporate internship program students in my class, and it's one of those things where they wanted to be into this, they're enjoying it, and those students I found were really good about keeping up with their work, checking on what they needed, and it is a great positive program that is happening at Mount St. Joseph, and I would say that is something that I want to put in my ideal school. And the other last thing is, I think teachers who get hired, I think this is another thing, is what teachers you hire. And the teachers that I would want to hire are the same teachers that if there's a conference that is coming out and it has a request for proposals, they'd put something in. So I'm really looking for those forward-thinking teachers. I'm really looking for those leadership teachers. And that's something I would really want to see in the ideal school. Then we got to do our reading, and we had to, again, reflect on any additional things we want to put in there. And I put in teaching change as a skill, or teaching change. And this is a concept I actually thought of several classes ago, where I found that the act of adapting to change, I consider more of a skill than something that someone just has to do. And the more you change, the more you learn, the more you're easily able to adapt, and the less stressful it becomes. So after the reading, I kind of threw that in there as teaching change as a skill is one of the requirements for these teachers. Moving on, we had brain-based learning is something that the professor was doing a lot of talking about and actually did his little presentation on. And basically, if you look at a scan of a brain, they're very, very pretty pictures. And hopefully I'll find one and I'll include it in the show notes. And one of the things that really resonated for me in all this brain-based things and all the connections is that no two people learn the same way, and that we all make connections differently. So to even fathom saying the way I'm teaching is going to work for everybody is just not there. The way you're teaching is going to work for one person and one person only, and that person may not even be in your classroom. So you really have to, when you're teaching now, you really have to think about the different ways people make connections and being able to teach so that each student can make those connections and they can have the learning more personalized to them. I'm taking the class on how to actually do that, so it's one of the more time-consuming things. And it also kind of goes back to why I put in that alternative learning day for teachers. I think teachers need to have more time that they can spend on building these lesson plans so they can bring in these concepts of universal design and brain-based learning and things like that. One of the readings, well, I guess it's not really readings anymore, it's calling it more like learning media that he assigned us to watch. One of them was Sir Ken Robinson's RSA anime, Changing Education Paradigms. Now, this is a really, really cool video, and I encourage you to watch it. It can pull you in, and you can see all these really great big ideas that should be brought into education. And I will admit, I got pulled into this and saying, yay, let's do it. And then it was going through some of the posts on the class, and my professor replied to, not mine, but one of the other classmates, saying, it's easy to be seduced by Robinson, but he doesn't have to figure out how to do his big ideas. And this really grounded me because it reminded me that it's okay to shoot for the sky, but you also have to know what is achievable. And if you keep shooting for the sky and you keep shooting for the sky, a lot of people, you'll get lost and you'll never accomplish what you're trying to get going. But if you try and take some more baby steps and look at, well, this is where I kind of want to be in the ideal world, what is achievable with my current resources, with my current school, and maybe take that and push it a little bit farther, because you don't want to just say, I can do this, and then not go farther. You really want to push yourself. So I love that comment where it says, don't be seduced by these really great big ideas. Come back and say, great to watch them, but look what's achievable and shoot for a little bit beyond that. The last thing I want to talk about for UDL is a quote that a student posted. And the quote is, to understand the world, you need to be able to read. To change the world, you need to be able to write. And I think this is a great quote, but when you apply it to UDL, I think it becomes dated in that UDL is about teaching to multiple ways that people learn and people understand. So reading is not the only way that people learn. And I think there are many more people who can gain an understanding, and reading is not the way. I'm one of those people. I'm really bad at reading, and reading is one of the things that is the hardest thing for me to gain an understanding from. But video and hands-on work really helps me understand a lot more. The same thing, a mechanic, to understand their world, it's not reading, it's really hands-on and trial and error. The other thing is change the world. You need to be able to write. I think writing is just one way of changing the world. It is not necessarily the only way to change the world. For example, I am hosting a podcast, which is audio recording, and it has a lot to do with the fact that I'm actually a very bad writer. So I've went through and I said, well, let me just modify this a little bit to apply UDL. And the way that I would write it was, to understand the world, you need to be able to learn. To change the world, you need to be able to share your understanding. And I think this kind of goes into a more universal way of understanding and applying change. Because you do need to understand things, and you just need to be able to learn things. That could be hands-on, and that could be however way that you learn best. And to change the world, you really need to share your understanding. If you're someone who understands everything and just kind of does it yourself, that's great, and you will be a very productive person in society, and I encourage everybody and anybody to at least get to that point. But to change the world, you need to take what you understand and share it with other people. In my case, I think I have a pretty good understanding of the Google Apps product and how it can be used in education. So I decided to share that knowledge through the podcast. And that's how I feel that you would invoke change, is by sharing your understanding. The medium of sharing, I think, is irrelevant. Writing is one way, podcast is another, video is another way. But I think to change the world, you need to share that understanding. And I think that's going to close up the show today. So thank you very much for listening to the Google Weekly Podcast with your host, Bjorn Behrendt. You can follow the podcast and contribute by going to www.google-weekly.net. You can follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Google+. I think I spend more time on Google+ and collaborate there. And I encourage you to become part of the conversation around the show by either posting comments on the website itself or in whatever social network that you use. Use the hashtag #GWPodcast. Again, thank you for listening, and never stop learning.
This is Torrance, and thank you for listening.